Most people interacting with Wikipedia are probably interacting with the English language version, because it contains the largest encyclopedia of gathered knowledge, citing works also in non-English language. However, growing up in a non-Anglosphere nation, odds are you're going to be using your own language-specific version of Wikipedia as you're developing your ability to read and write English. For some, that English language Wikipedia version is never going to be very accessible, as they've not been afforded the opportunity to learn English. This is especially the case for the country of Croatia. A lot of websites cite a 2019 Eurobarometer report that concludes about 60% of Croatians speak English. I wasn't able to find the exact source for the citation, as the national report that I found was in Croatian, a language that I was never given the opportunity to learn. Note that this 60% figure is based on a poll, and most numbers that you'll see like this have been sourced in completely different ways, so aren't really comparable across nations. But this 60% figure means that a significant part of the population of Croatia is unable to access the wealth of the sometimes dubious and sometimes good knowledge on English language Wikipedia, without of course resorting to imperfect machine translation software. Luckily, they've got Croatian language Wikipedia, which like its sister sites is maintained by volunteers doing a thankless job of trying to edit articles and provide access to somewhat reliable knowledge to a broad reader base. Well, they have it now at least. Between 2011 and 2020, Croatian Wikipedia was a fucking problem. In 2013, the Croatian newspaper Jutarnji, which I'm probably butchering, published a story written by Professor Jurica Pavičić, which I'm also probably butchering, who I think now works at the economics faculty at the University of Zagreb. In this article, the professor exposed the fascist takeover of Croatian Wikipedia. According to the professor, the slow march through the institutions of Croatian Wikipedia began in 2009, as a small group of less than 10 anti-communist administrators of the site began to consolidate power by purging wiki editors for holding moderate or liberal views on controversial issues. Essentially, as of 2009, the Croatian wiki was undergoing a slow fascist coup. The Wikimedia Disinformation Assessment report on the subject found that the purposeful manipulation of content on Croatian wiki had been ongoing since as early as 2007. It got so bad that on September 13th, 2013, the Croatian Minister of Education had to come out and say, "Regrettably, we must warn Croatian students and pupils that much of the content on Croatian version Wikipedia is not only dubious but also evidently falsified." Although the efforts of this small group of fascists likely had an effect on pretty much every aspect of Croatian language Wikipedia, the most egregious stuff concerned the promotion of conspiracy theories regarding socialist Yugoslavia and whitewashing the collaborationist Nazi puppet regime, the so-called independent state of Croatia, which was headed by the infamous Ustaše. One genuinely insane thing they tried to push, according to the Wikimedia report, was the idea that Hitler invaded Poland in response to Polish genocide against Germans. Another wonderful highlight was that the Croatian language article on the Jasenovac concentration camp was mostly concerned with disputing the numbers of victims. This camp represents the only such extermination camp operated by a collaborationist regime purely on their own accord for the purpose of exterminating Jews and other ethnic groups. As late as 2019, the article on the concentration camp claimed that this was all Yugoslavian propaganda, quote, aimed at denigrating, stigmatizing, and silencing Croats, to cultivate a constant sense of shame inextricably linked to Croatian national consciousness and to taboo every thought of Croatian independence. The parafascist clique was led by a user by the name of Kubura. Kubura's first edit on Wikipedia was made in 2005. Kubura and their clique were most definitely far-right ultranationalist anti-communists with sympathies for the murderous Ustaše. That's as much as one can say definitively about their ideology without digging much deeper. When I refer to them as Nazis, fascists, and so on, I do so in a colloquial manner and not in an academic manner. These guys, while sympathetic to the Nazi Party, were not members of the Nazi Party or necessarily adherents of outright German Nazi ideology, nor do they necessarily fit the academic definition of a fascist. However, they do fit the academic definition of a parafascist, which for the layman is essentially the same thing. I'm clarifying this because it's a lot easier to call them fascists than far-right ultranationalists veering into parafascist tendencies every time I talk about them. In 2009, the user Kubura was elected to the position of admin by a vote of 24 for, 5 against, and 6 neutral. The top dissenting vote pointed out the user's ultranationalism. The top comment under the election speculates that the 2 of the dissenting votes are from sock accounts, and suggests narrowing the right to vote to more frequent contributors. It's very funny in retrospect to read the beginnings of this soft fascist coup like this. In 2010, Kubura Kobura was found to have abused his admin tools by blocking a user who had participated in drafting a request for another user to be given global rollback power. This would enable them to roll back any article's edits immediately. The user who was nominated for this role was one of the users who had voted against Kobura becoming an admin. Essentially, Kobura was purging people who showed support for their detractors. This saw the extraordinary intervention of a Wikipedia steward by the name of Oscar. Stewards are essentially global admins who are only to intervene when local admins aren't able to govern. I'm sure I got some of that wrong, I'm not a Wikipedia nerd. The steward removed Kobura's admin powers as a result of this abuse. A few months later, Kobura's admin position was reinstated by the local government. Again, 5 users spoke up against him receiving the admin tools. Then in 2013, this all started blowing up in Croatian media, and reached international media attention as well. The same year, a user by the name of Tritomex went about trying to clean up the Croatian language article on the Ustaše, which contained a long, unsourced, and frankly fucking hilarious tirade which I will now read a machine translation of. Is the Ustaše movement consciously right-wing, radical, racist, maybe even totalitarian? The answer to that is no. In Croatian society, here and there, as a sign of defiance due to the servile mentality often displayed by official Croatian politics, and the anti-Croatian machinations of the countries that embody the currently ruling quasi-liberal, manipulative, quote-unquote Masonic globalist states, the ostentatious highlighting of elements of Ustaše iconography appears. The second question is the Ustaše movement actually a radical anti-Serb movement by central habitus? It could be said that the anti-Serb charge is extremely strong in it, as a result of a combination of Serbian oppression and domination, supported by the countries of the old Entente. The persistence of the anti-Croatian policy of some Western countries inevitably gives rise to irritation and repressed aggressiveness, but not towards the Serbs as such, but towards the opponents of Croatian independence. All this shows that the issue of the alleged problem of Ustaše in Croatian society is actually the problem of the profile and future of societies and countries such as the EU and USA members. Globalization and the exploitative moves of the leading countries, which are often called out, are a real generator of dissatisfaction in societies that have just gotten rid of communism, and it does not occur to them to drown in some kind of new associations, in which they will play a second-class and subservient role. For removing this insane bit of nonsense, Tritomex was blocked by Kobura from making any edits to Croatian Wikipedia. As removing this was clearly the correct course of action, several users took issue with the block and suggested that Kobura and seemingly elements of his inner circle, including users Speedy Gonzalez and Seljico, be stripped of their administrative tools. This motion seems to have failed on procedural grounds. This was seemingly the last attempt at official dissent towards Kobura's regime. After this, slowly users were purged or demoralized from contributing to Croatian Wikipedia, unless they shared the far-right nationalist para-fascist vision for the site that Kobura's inner circle had cultivated. In 2017, 4 years after the fascist takeover of the wiki had garnered media attention, the user Fraxinus nominated Kobura to be promoted to the role of bureaucrat. Bureaucrats are essentially super-admins whose job is to promote and demote administrators. According to the rules for Wikipedia, these bureaucrats are only allowed to take actions that reflect the community's wishes. Essentially, they need the express consent of the governed. After years of marginalization of any opposition and of constant purges, this was not a problem for Kobura's clique. On August 25, 2017, Kobura was unanimously voted to the position of bureaucrat, with 21 votes, 0 votes against and 0 votes neutral. Among the people who chose to rubber stamp the decision were the accounts who many had worked to oust in the years prior, such as Speedy Gonzalez. At this point, Kobura and their inner circle had complete control over what information was added to or removed from hundreds of thousands of articles. That was 2017. Let's take a break from the sequence of events and have a look at some of the findings of the report by an external expert on the matter, published by the Wikimedia Foundation. In terms of impact, the Disinformation Assessment Report found that there had been a systematic distortion of facts about individuals convicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. They also found that between 2017 and 2020, articles containing nationalist bias were regularly among the top 30 read entries on the Croatian wiki. The report found that the presence of this biased content in a certain ideological alignment can constitute an organized disinformation campaign, which I think it's fair to say this essentially was. Information from Wikipedia is fed directly into Google's knowledge panel info boxes that appear at the top of the search results, and a study from the University of Osijek, Croatia, found that 54% of undergraduate students regularly use Wikipedia as an educational tool. The report concludes that nationalist bias and disinformation through the Croatian wiki has been influencing the public discourse for the period in which Koruba's regime was in control. Surveys among Croatian high school students shows that they seemingly progressively over the period became a little bit less sure whether the so-called independent state of Croatia was a fascist puppet state. Though this is not causally related, the fascist capture of Croatian Wikipedia and the pervasive confusion among students are likely symptoms of the same underlying issue in Croatian society, those being strong racist and ethno-nationalist sentiments and prevailing hardline anti-communism, giving inroads to far-right nationalist myths, and the whitewashing of fascists by nationalists searching for non-communist heroes when constructing the idea of their national identity. Professor Pavicic in 2013 said that much of the Croatian mainstream is dominated by quote-unquote communist nostalgia and memories of an era of social safety. According to him, this is a source of much frustration for the right wing, and I'd say this probably in part motivates these movements to lie about Croatian history. Despite this, like pretty much always, the fear of the communists is not proportional to the real power. 10 of 12 Croatian governments between 1991 and 2021 have been led by the center-right nationalist Croatian Democratic Union, which has partial origins in the anti-communist Catholic conservative Croatian diaspora. So while this caused a stir in Croatian media and likely had an impact on students and others in Croatia, leading possibly to an increase in conspiratorial and far-right thinking, this seemingly hasn't been quantified, at least not yet. One identifiable impact, however, was that it suppressed the passionate and voluntary work of dozens, maybe hundreds, of wonderful Wikipedia contributors. I've been speaking in past tense about the Kabura regime because Kabura was ousted in 2020, when a user by the name of MJ Lemonsnout, as well as others, compiled a report for Wikimedia requesting that Kabura be globally banned. In 2020, a user by the name of Riley ran for election for the role of steward, the global superadmin role that can, under strict conditions, intervene in local communities. One such steward had intervened in 2010 to strip Kabura of their admin tools. Riley did not win their election, due to a number of pivotal votes seemingly from the Croatian community. It turns out that Riley, as an admin, had been helping support the various threads investigating Kabura's misconduct on the Croatian wiki. Another user by the name of Lasta had previously noticed suspicious conduct among some of these Croatian users. In order to have voting rights on Croatian Wikipedia, you had to make 200 edits and also 50 edits in the last 12 months. These users would show up and make around 50 edits in the span of 1 to 2 hours and then disappear for months. These users also never posted at the same time, and while posting in roughly the same time span that Kabura would usually post, they also never posted at the same time as Kabura. Lasta created a list of some 90 possible sock puppet accounts run by Kabura. 12 of these voted in Riley's steward election, and had they not, Riley would have won. Lasta also submitted what's called a local check user request for 37 of these accounts, which, if approved, would tell the staff of Croatian Wikipedia to investigate the IP addresses of the users to determine if they're posting from the same place. Every single account immediately stopped posting. One member of Kabura's clique chimed in to the check user request in an attempt to clear Kabura's name, and in so doing accidentally sealed their fate. They posted the findings of a check user on 38 accounts, and while this cleared some of the accounts, it also showed that while 30 of these accounts were posting from different IPs, they were also posting from a single ISP from a single geographical area. Some probability math was run, and apparently the chances of this happening accidentally was 1 in a quintillion. On the basis of this investigation, MJ Lemonsnout and the rest requested that Kabura be globally banned from Wikipedia. Many of those that expressed support for Kabura in this thread were members of his inner circle who had previously voted for his promotions. At this point, only 6 people had ever received a global ban from all Wikimedia projects. After this report and investigation, Kabura became the 7th. The expert report on the incident essentially concluded that this entire fiasco was a byproduct of the strategic mistake of creating a separate Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian language Wikipedia next to the existing Serbo-Croatian project. The creation of these separate Wikipedia projects created an ethno-national division of the original Serbo-Croatian community that deprived them of editorial diversity, which made each community prone to nationalist bias. And although it seems that by removing the leadership of the fascist clique, allowing Croatian Wiki to elect new admins in 2021, adhering to the principles of Wikipedia, the expert report concludes that if the underlying factors that allowed the rise of this fascist group to begin with are not addressed, it may happen again. The 3 proposed solutions are: encouraging the Croatian-speaking community to continue re-establishing a robust local governance system, requesting oversight and support from the rest of Wikimedia as needed. This would require additional checks and monitoring so as to not backslide again. Number 2, encourage the affected communities to discuss unifying community elections for admin and functionary roles across the involved wikis, those being Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, and Serbo-Croatian. This sort of cross-wiki collaboration has precedence in Arabic language Wikipedia, where in 2020 they set up cross-wiki role accounts operated by a central committee of trusted users under Wikimedia Foundation and steward oversight for their wikis, specifically to address the challenge that ISIS posed to Arabic language Wikipedia. This would maintain the current autonomy of the communities while creating cross-community collaboration, sort of a union of nations of the former Yugoslavia just in the Wikipedia sphere. Number 3. Encouraging the affected communities to discuss the possibility of re-merging Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian language projects into the original Serbo-Croatian language project, to realign with the practices of other pluricentric languages with unified Wikipedia projects. This includes, but is not limited to, Chinese, English, German, Spanish, Tamil, Korean, and French language Wikipedias. This would be the Yugoslavia solution, essentially. A larger, more diverse community would be able to protect itself better from takeover like this, and would render support from global Wikimedia Foundation institutions much easier. It might also help cultivate a cross-national encyclopedic style of language that makes the project more valuable to a wider audience of potential editors and readers across the Southwestern Balkans and beyond. The problem with this approach is that Croatians don't want it. They acknowledge that presently having 4 different versions of essentially the same articles that can be read by most people from all 4 communities is a waste of time and resources, but they still want to maintain their autonomy. Merging existing communities is never easy, as you have to sort out who gets what positions, old dynamics clash with new dynamics, and so on. And finally, this would make the far-right and nationalist energies in the former Yugoslavia go fucking nuts, and probably vindicate their conspiratorial thinking that the communist editors of Truth and Knowledge online are trying to force a reconstruction of the old Yugoslavia, which of course this wouldn't be, it's just Wikipedia, but you know how they get. So in conclusion, the fascists took advantage of institutions vulnerable to their entry into and seizure of those institutions. Once they were in, they consolidated power. Once power had been consolidated and the democratic institutions were under their control, there was no way to wrest control out of their hands through those institutions. The only way to deal with them was by force, from outside of that local institution. Courtesy of MJ Lemonsnout, Lasta, and others who brought the issue to people who could wield executive power against Kabura and their clique. There are a lot of underlying antagonisms in this situation that both motivated and allowed Kabura's clique to gather enough motivated support to execute their weird little coup. So long as these antagonisms remain, and ethno-nationalist right-wing groups and media orgs are allowed to stoke them, this is probably going to keep happening. That's not to say malicious capture by other small groups with other motives aren't also likely to happen. We'll probably see those too. The report on the incident, published by the Wikimedia Foundation, compared the event to real-world institutional capture and democratic backsliding. If there's something applicable to the real world to be learned from Croatian Wikipedia, it's that fixing Croatian Wikipedia, or in the real world, a specific local issue of far-right institutional capture, isn't the solution. It's a temporary stopgap. Global Wikipedia was unable to address this situation in a timely manner despite being aware of it for years. After this fiasco, they're probably going to be quicker to resolve an issue like this in the future, but patching up holes isn't enough. Any systemic problem requires systemic solutions. Thanks for watching.